Hello, everybody. There are two magic words to know if you have reversed insulin resistance. What are they? We are going to review those tonight using some of the volunteers, I'm going to put that in air quotes, from the Pin Chasers, the support group that I run every Tuesday. They volunteered to check and show you, are they reversed? Have they done it? Are they cured from insulin resistance? And there is some magic in figuring out, have they arrived or are they still on a journey to get there? Welcome to Tuesday night, everybody. I am live from Knoxville, Tennessee. So we have set up the chat and the show to answer your questions as we go through this. Last week, several of you wrote in and did even call into the nurse and ask questions about what does this mean for my blood sugar? So we put a lot of questions out there last week. We're going to answer some of them tonight and take this lesson a little further than we did last week. Last week I showed you an example of reversed insulin resistance. And tonight we're going to see, well, what are the keys to know if these patients have reversed? So stick around. I'm looking at the chat right now, seeing several of the newbies that are out there. I would pose the question for you guys to put in the chat, and obviously if you're watching this on replay, you'll be able to see what many of the answers are, but it would be great to see what two metrics do you think are going to be the magic words for us to look at as we look at that reversed insulin resistance. All right, so we are going to start with some slides, and when I push this little button, it's supposed to show you these slides. Let's make sure all that works. Again, thanks for everybody in the chat. Give me a chat. Give me a signal if there's any troubles with the sound or if you can't see some of these things. All right. So last week we talked about this slide. We looked at normal glucose tolerance. And I was using a study. So I'm going to point out a few things on this slide. This says the 75 grams of glucose. That's that glucola drink that we use for an oral glucose tolerance test. If you've been pregnant in the last, 30 years, you've had one of those telling you whether or not you're headed towards gestational diabetes. What I would put here, what I want to draw your attention to is not just that it's a normal glucose tolerance, but it's not food. Because we're going to compare this to what happens inside a study versus what happens with food. The other important part to point out with this slide is this test was done looking at what is the most dangerous when we're looking at trying to predict who is going to get diabetes. And the way they were able to do that is it's one of the very few studies done in 2006 that used an insulin clamp. This means that they hold the glucose stable and they use a steady amount, they use insulin and glucose to keep that, to keep the glucose to keep the insulin from being churned up by the liver. In many of these tests that don't use that insulin clamp, we get some some numbers that do not make sense clinically. And it was because this really fancy test that you can only do in research uses an insulin clamp. And I would contend that's one of the reasons this study is such a profound improvement of our understanding of who has insulin resistance. Are we reversing it? Thank you to the folks that did this study. I will put that link in the show notes for those of you that want to check it out. All right, let's keep going here with this slide. So this is a normal person. This is a normal person. Now I would contend this yellow is the insulin. The glucose is in red. This insulin started out at 12. If you came to my clinic and you had a fasting insulin of 12, I would tell you you're abnormal, but they called that normal. All right, so here goes the glucose. After 30 minutes of that glucose tolerance test, it shot up to 140. It then showed the glucose slightly going down over the next 30 minutes. Now you're at 60 minutes. We love to see that less than 130 in the clinic, but they said, yep, this is still normal. The 90-minute mark are now down to about 125, and then back to 110 by the 2-hour point. Now, if you look at some of the guidelines that came from this study, we like to see the 2-hour mark that you are back to baseline. And I know that it's not a perfect match, but hang with me. I'll go through that as we look at some of the difference between swallowing a bunch of glucose and what happens when you eat. All right, so the next thing we'll look at is what happened to their insulin. In normal people, this insulin shoots up to like 90 at the 30-minute mark. Again, this test did the best job of saying, did the insulin end up in the liver churned up, or did the insulin actually see this delta rise, this increase? So again, a very good study to be able to have confidence in the research. At the 1 hour mark, we're almost at 120, 117, I think the numbers were. But by the 90-minute mark, the glucose has come back down to that 90 level in the blood. And it stayed about that at the 2-hour mark. All right, that is normal glucose tolerance test. That's using a glucose or an insulin clamp. This was again 2006, and since then many clinicians have come together saying, I think there's something in there that still leads to disease. So in a patient, somebody who is not insulin resistant, has never been insulin resistant, or in patients where we see all of their lab markers coming back to the place where I don't see disease growing, I don't see chronic inflammation, I really do see, if you could put longevity in a bottle, this is the kind of patient that has the kind of biomarkers throughout their body that really has transformed into no insulin resistance. All right, so they ate a meal. First of all, they ate a meal. Now it was standardized in these studies, but for the purposes of YouTube, you would eat a meal. Before the meal, your glucose would be under 90. This caused a lot of confusion last week, so we'll try to get to that question as we get to the Q&A at the end of this. But when you eat the meal, the glucose should be back down to under 140 by the 30-minute mark. By the 60-minute mark, we want it under 130. So if you see my cursor here, we want this one under 140, this one under 130, and this one under 110. So it is that 90-minute mark that we use a lot of these clinical studies. We don't always take them to the 2-hour mark. And indeed, very helpful for us to be able to predict who's making problems, who's not. When we look at insulin, this is again where I think it is much different than what you saw on that last slide. A fasting insulin of 6, very good idea. Once that meal goes in, the insulin can shoot up to just under 40. It will go a little bit higher or stay that stable part around that 30 mark for insulin. But by the time you get to the 90-minute mark, you are back in the teens for insulin. Again, this is not always the easiest thing to do or test, but you'll see a striking difference between what we do clinically and what happens with that insulin clamp. I want you to look at the shape of that insulin as a way to understand what is healthy, what does that look like. All right, so that's really a recap of what we went through last week. We are going to take a closer look at somebody who had impaired glucose tolerance. Impaired glucose tolerance means that they have a normal glucose at the beginning, and we have a patient who fits this profile delightfully, who happens to go to the Pin Chasers, and we're going to use his real life example to show you what got me nervous and what was a really a great teachable moment. All right, so impaired glucose tolerance. They show up, their glucose is normal, their insulin is pretty normal. Within 30 minutes of their 75 grams of glucose. Actually, this should say a meal here. Sorry about that. 30 minutes of eating a meal, his glucose was just over 140. And then at the 60-minute mark, his glucose, actually, I'm sorry, this is the one from the study. This is not the patient yet. That's why they do swallow the glucose, the 75 grams of glucose. Their fasting numbers are, at the 90 level. At the 30-minute mark, it was just over 140. At the hour mark, it's almost 170. At the 90-minute mark, it hasn't changed much. It's still at that 170. And at 2 hours, it might be slightly down. Now, carefully look at the shape of that glucose profile over 2 hours. And then watch how much insulin it took to support that. So as we look at the insulin at the 30-minute mark, it is way up there. It's up to 90. Again, that was one of the higher numbers from the last time. It then goes up a little higher by the hour. At 90 minutes, it's even higher. And at 120 minutes, it's as high as I have ever seen them. So that impaired glucose tolerance, this is a sneaky patient. This patient They come into the doctor and they often have these fasting glucoses that look okay. Even their hemoglobin A1C can look pretty good for a while, and then it smolders. They get missed. When you look at what this looks like in a patient, oh yeah, that's the part I wanted to say. Danger for looking at the area under the curve for insulin. I won't go back to that slide, but danger for what the area under the curve was is really important there. Okay. So here's one of our volunteers. I'll say thank you to him ahead of time. I do want to point out there are some really key things to his history. So I've known this patient for at least 3 years now, maybe 4 years. And he picked the worst parents. His genetics are predisposed for medical problems that really hit, he's a male, that really hit the males in their family young. When it hits them, it is unforgiving. Those are heart disease, strokes, and really does shave away the quality of their life because of what you're going to see in the slide. And that is, it's hidden. You're going to see the slide from him this week. He did one meal. The first meal is going to be a very ketogenic meal. I don't know if there was hardly a carb in it, sauerkraut and sausage or what he ate, one of my favorite meals. And the numbers you're going to see on this first slide is the second meal of the day. We're then going to see what happens when he eats a meal that's not so perfectly ketogenic in the past week. And then you're going to see what he was doing a year ago. Let's look at those slides. All right, so here is that second meal of the day, and we're going to look at what his blood sugar was. At the start of his blood sugar, I called him a recovering insulin-resistant patient. He's in recovery, yes. So his blood sugar, it's below 90. You would never know by his history of, the incredible tax his body has going on inside his blood vessels. But boy, his fasting sugar is 90. He then eats his high-fat meal, and it doesn't even get to the triple digits in this example. He ate to satiety, and again, it was the second meal of the day. We know that when you break a fast, it is a much easier scenario to see a blood sugar under the 90s. Wait till you see what the next slide shows. All right, 90 minutes, his blood sugar might be lower than when he started, but it really does hold stable at that 2-hour mark. So some things to notice. Look at the shape of that curve. Notice that the blood sugar at the beginning is the same as it was at the end, at the 2-hour mark. Even the 90 mark, he's back down to baseline. When you look at his ketones, that's what really should shock you. He starts out with a Dr. Boz ratio of 68 because his blood ketones are 1.4 there or something. And then he eats. So insulin rises whenever you eat a little, but look at how slightly that decreases. I mean, maybe he's at 1.1 there, 1.2, with the Dr. Boz ratio of 84. Again, looking at that Dr. Boz ratio, that the lower it is, the lesser the insulin. The higher it is, the higher the insulin. And that's a relative comparison. So for him, this is a pretty good number. Again, the ketones at the hour mark go down a little bit further, but still keep his Dr. Boz ratio under 100, which is really good. And he does finally end with a bang. Again, watch to see what that ketone does at the end. Look at the pattern of what his glucose was doing, which was stable, and then the rise of what his ketones did. So he said, well, let's do something in his world that he would say is naughty. It's not naughty. Oh, you know what? This is going to point out, no, here it is. He did a half of an Italian sub. So he put that half Italian sub in, and he had done that breaking a 48-hour fast, or a pretty significant, I think it was 48 hours. So again, blood sugar at the beginning of this was 70. This patient, he has major disease hiding behind his, beautiful smile. Yeah, and how would a doctor know? How would you know? I don't know. His fasting sugar looks great. His even the second meal of the day, blood sugar looked good. At the 30-minute mark, it shoots way up, but it still stays under 110. It really doesn't rise that much. And when you look at the hour mark, it is a little higher, and then it comes down a little bit. Okay, but again, I have people that would pay for this kind of a blood sugar response. And by the 2-hour mark, Well, it certainly isn't back to baseline. So look at the shape of that glucose. So does he have a problem? Is he insulin resistant? I want you to take notice that there are a few things in this slide deck that are the key to, his struggle. First of all, an Italian sub is great for him. He has been on the ketogenic diet again for the last 4 years, and there have been seasons where he's been really good about keeping those carbs down, but he lives in the real world where the temptations are around family who are not keto, and despite having such a great response to his intervention of changing the way his food is consumed, it was hard to stay the course. And I said, if you ever needed evidence that Satan is alive and well, a Cuban bakery opened up just down the street from where he lives. He goes, as soon as that dang place opened, I swear the chocolate cake called my name. And although it wasn't a lot, and it wasn't very often, whenever that happened, there were problems. As you look at the amount of rise in that glucose from his Italian sub, that is a significant change from the previous meal, which was done maybe a day or 2 days earlier from that previous one. All right, so what's his Dr. Boz ratio? He starts out with a ketone of just under 2.5. So that's a ketone to brag home amount. Now again, it's the end of a 48-hour fast. So good job. But then at the 30-minute mark, he is in the churn of making so many ketones that his ketones do not change much at 30 minutes. By 60 minutes, okay, the insulin is churning. You can notice that there is a further rise here in that blood sugar. And by golly, when insulin's on the rise, ketone production comes to a stop. And I mean a stop. If you've got some in circulation, it's going to last for, maybe the 15, 20 minutes, but not long. So he is on the decline there. As you get to the now persistently elevated insulin, I mean, how much insulin did that half a sub stimulate out of his pancreas? I have a pretty good guess that it was a hearty amount by the time we're at the 90-minute mark. At the 2-hour mark, his ketones went to I had to adjust the scale here for you to be able to see it. It's about 1. So his blood sugar was 106 and his ketones were 1. So that's a Dr. Boz ratio of 1. Now that is a great blood sugar if you aren't looking at this in context for what this man has dealt with. And I think I put the warning signals on here after I pulled away the slides. Maybe not. I put the danger that look at how high that blood sugar was relative to where he started. And then there was a really big clue by how low that ketone was at the time. All right, so we are going to look at this gentleman a year ago. So I'm going to do one more little pitch about what was happening a year ago. So he had been at keto for a while. He comes to the Pin Chasers. He gets to see me every week or most weeks out of the month in that support group. And whenever he was fasting, he was doing great. But then a season happened where fasting was really hard and it was like it's lonely. And unfortunately, this patient had a heart attack in February of this year. He's already had a stroke. He's had some persistently high blood pressure, I think since he was 30. So he's got plenty of risk factors. And that heart attack was, it's the kind you just, when the patient's telling you the story, you are so thankful they're sitting in front of you because many don't get to tell me the story. And what I knew was, all right, he really needs to cut the volume of food and he needs some help with fasting. So we started him on GLP-1 microdosing. And as much as it's still difficult for him to do a 72-hour fast, suddenly he's like, I can't believe how little I want that chocolate cake. I can't believe how easy it is for me to really put a goal of fasting for 48 hours and stick to it. And I'm going to show you the slide from last year. So 1 year ago, same guy, recovering insulin resistant guy, his fasting blood sugar is great. I mean, you are going to be tricked. If you're waiting for your doctor to find this, you are going to hide from your doctor so well that you have anything wrong with your blood sugar. But he puts in, well, last year he would have eaten the whole Italian sub. He might even have the cookie with it. I don't know if that's true, but for sure, eat the whole sub. If there's one major thing that he's noticed while being on the tirzepatide, it's microdosing, it's not a lot, tiny dosing on a ketogenic diet, adding a little bit of this hormone, he is able to say, I have leftovers that get to the third day sometimes. That never happened before. I just ate it. I wouldn't want it to go to, whatever reason people eat those leftovers. So if you look at that Italian sub going in, he's got a blood sugar at the 30-minute mark in the 130s. He's got a 60-minute mark at 140s and 90 minutes and 120. But notice the shape of that. The shape of that is exactly the one that we showed you 2 slides ago, where he came out of a fast, had half of the sub. And although this started at 70 and the top number at that point was 110, much less blood sugar. But the shape is what is curious to me. All right, so if you look at his Dr. Boz ratio, again, he starts his ketones out. A year ago, if he had a 1, he was going to write home about it. Also, not much change at the 30-minute mark. Definitely goes down to 0.5 by the time he's at the 60-minute mark, even lower by the time he gets to the 120 mark. So again, you're going to see that this is a sign of danger, the blood sugar that did not return to normal at the 120 mark. And you're going to see a ketone that says, this is giving you a big clue. How much insulin is it taking to fix this, to undo this? And the answer is, yeah, it's taking a lot of insulin. And that is what is driving pathology. That is what is making insulin resistance. Okay, so again, real teachable moment. There's the danger sign that was on, if the build was in the right order. All right, so let's go to the things I want you to take notice of. I'm not going to give away all the answers, but take notice. Take notice of the shape of the glucose response. You'll know that this is totally going to be up to you to find this. Your doctor is not going to find this. Unless you're pregnant and getting a glucose tolerance test, they aren't going to do this. But you can do it at home. You can do this at home. And then volume of food matters so much in these patients. They hide. And if I had to tell this patient what is the key for his success, first of all, fasting is a really powerful place that we are reversing his insulin resistance. But his ability to consume food at a much lower volume transforms his success. I mean, that's really a key part of it. What I think isn't talked about in this slide, but we're going to see in the next slide, and I hear again and again from patients over time, is that if they binge, and I'm putting that in air quotes because is a sub a binge? Well, on my program, an Italian sub would totally be a binge. It's more than 20 carbs per day. If we're trying to reverse this, they got to stay under that, and for sure he had more than 20 carbs that day. But there are other places where they said, okay, I was so good, and then I had just a bite of cake or a bite of something that is their favorite, and their ketones go to the floor. The real measuring stick that I'm going to look at is, how long does it start for them to tickle awake? How long is it going to be that their body will allow the production of ketones again? Again, if insulin is still being produced or is at this higher or rising level relative to what it was the day before, you are not going to make ketones. And you'll have people write in saying, I don't understand. It was just a, bite of something. And I am a week before I got my blood sugar to go under 130 or under 100 and 100, get out of the 3-digit to the 2-digit. And you say, yeah, if you were watching ketones, it would be, I've seen it 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days before the ketones get off the floor. So again, that's a really important part for somebody who's got this impaired glucose tolerance. And that is in contrast to somebody, so impaired glucose tolerance. These are the sneaky people. They're the ones the doctors will not find. They grow disease like wildfire. And I think in part it's because it's hidden to the doctor too. But when you look at impaired fasting glucose, doctors will see this. So here's our next patient. She also comes to the Pin Chasers. She has impaired fasting glucose. We're going to actually use what the study done in 2000 looked at when they had the 75 grams of glucose. They looked at those who had impaired fasting glucose. So again, her fasting glucose is 110, triple digits, not good. Doctors will say, you're pre-diabetic. They should say, you're pre-diabetic. This is not good. You're in trouble. You've got problems. When they were looking at their insulin, this insulin was higher than the previous example, but it's only by a few points, which is why I think the insulins should be in the single digits for fasting numbers. But hers is going to be elevated. I think it was like 17 at what this profile was on this case. All right, so 30-minute mark, her blood sugar's up to 170. 60-minute mark, their blood sugars are up to 180. By 90 minutes, it is coming down, and by 120, it is really close to baseline. So if you look at the amount of insulin that is produced in this case, the insulin really kind of follows, not exactly, but it has a much more similar shape to what the glucose was. Again, that glucose in the other one went up and stayed. And the amount of insulin that other patient made was a lot of insulin. This is insulin, but it is coming down at that 120 mark. Not perfect, but really it is controlling the glucose, which again is important for that pathology. All right, so that's our study from 2006. Let's take a real life patient who eats meals, doesn't swallow glucola. And again, this patient has had a wildly successful story, really known that her metabolic health was compromised, but there's seasons in life, and had a really difficult, one of life's worst moments a year ago where she buried a child. And it was in the grieving of that she said, I've got to address this. I've got to take care of this. And her doctor had done these things, had told her, your fasting glucose is too high. You are pre-diabetic. And so she signs up, and this is what her numbers look like at the year mark. I think she's taken the 21-day class 3 times. It might be 4, but that's got to only be 2. I don't know, whatever. She only did this a year ago. She is, anyway, she's practicing the Dr. Boz numbers by coming to the pin chasers and really just leaning in to say, how do I perfect this now? So this is at the 1-year mark. You're going to see what her numbers were a year ago in about 3 slides. So meal was eaten here. Her fasting sugar. Oh, I would call her pre-diabetic for sure. Okay, there's another teaching point to this. She goes to do this experiment for all of the volunteers, and I picked this example because of this first number. Her first blood sugar is not what she wants it to be. As she eats the meal, and then it goes down to 92. Huh. Okay. Then it goes up to 95, maybe, if you're out there. And now you're almost the same. At an hour and a half, you're at 95. And then at 120, it's back down again. All right, so there's a clue here that something's wrong. Like, that doesn't look like a human. There's something wrong with this chart. So let me show you what the ketones are doing and then what my guess was. I give it away there. Don't look at that just yet. Go to the next one. So she starts out with a ketone at about 0.7, 0.8, and you can say, boy, that wasn't as good as the boys. You say, stop that. This is really good for her. And when this is a normal random day, but she wasn't fasting. This is, what is it before I start eating? And she eats, and the ketone goes down just a hint. So maybe it went from 0.6 or 0.7 down to 0.5. And now maybe that was 0.7, 0.6, 0.5. So it's steady slope down, that it's not a plummet down, it is a step down. And you get to the 90-minute mark. And then she has the gift of it stabilizing at the 2-hour mark. Okay, so the sugar is controlled and the ketones are flat here. What I think happened is this blood sugar was not an accurate reflection of what her blood sugar really was. Okay, and I tell people this, a point of care meter, the best brand in the world is going to be plus or minus 5. And so even if she's plus or minus 5 and gets down to from 105 down to 99, I would contend that if she would have taken it again, or even if she took it 2 or 3 times, I would want to see, that blood sugar doesn't match what the ketones are doing. And I have a spoiler alert coming in a second. I won't spoil it. I'll wait and deliver it. So to me, I'm like, I bet this blood sugar was here if I was doing it at the lab, where it still makes mistakes, but it's much less often and it's much less variable. Like at the lab, it's plus or minus 2. The point of care is plus or minus 5. So that can be as much as a 10-point swing of what is the true number there, right? So as I push the next slide. Okay, so let's back up and say, so she was irritated that this happened. So she said, so I'm going to do it again. Oh, this was showing that there's a good sign of what her ketones did there at the end. So yeah, I think, all right. So she says, I'm going to try again. Her fasting blood sugar this time was not as great as she wanted it to be, but it is below 100, and that's really good for her. So there's her blood sugar. She eats her ketogenic meal, and it goes up, blood sugar goes up a few points, but not even 110. By the 60-minute point, she really has not hypoglycemia, but she has a drop in blood sugar. By the 90-minute point, she has blood sugars of 80, and then she stabilizes back out at that 120 hour or 2 hours at about 85. In the background, the ketones start out at, again, that same place that she likes to hang out at. She starts out at 106. They drop a little at the 30-minute point. And again, it took insulin, a tiny little bit of insulin, but nothing like what we saw in the previous patient where it shot way up and the ketones just spiked down. This ketone number really is, it is impressive to keep your ketones that stable during a meal. That is a really good sign. That is a really good sign for this woman. And it is even more impressive when you see what happened to her a year ago. Oh, dang it, it's out of order there. Okay, so here is giving her a little bit of credence. So this is again over the past week. Her blood glucoses are this kind of brownish gray line, and you can see that her morning numbers have been, pretty darn good. So when I made that assumption that her blood glucose was probably not 105 first thing in the morning, it was probably in this range. It wasn't just a whim; it was based on a few things, but these are the patterns of what her blood glucose has been doing over the past week, and she wakes up with a pretty darn good blood sugar in the morning. Again, really having excellent Dr. Boz ratios. And if you look at her life a year ago, we're going to pretend she ate an Italian sub. Her fasting blood sugar before she started this was 110. At the 30-minute mark, she's up to 130, up to almost 150 at the 60 mark. And 120, or at the 90 minutes, she's about 130, and at 2 hours, she's back to baseline. Notice the shape of that. All right, so then we look at the Dr. Boz ratio, and at the beginning, those ketones were terrible. Not terrible, but 0.4, they're on the floor. This was a year ago. Within within an hour of eating, her ketones are not measurable. 0.1, 0.1, 0.1 is going to be the ending, yeah. So just the amount of insulin that it's going to take to push this to 0. And she suffered the most difficult consequence, which is she couldn't get him off the floor again for several days. She would definitely be one of the people that I just think I'm supposed to fast for the rest of my life. And I'm like, no, that's not what we're trying to tell you. So again, I wanted to point out the danger points of where the blood sugar started in a pre-diabetic. This was the year ago. And then how high that blood sugar got within an hour. Even though it did come back down at that 120, the ketones at the end were the part that's not good. All right, so with the people who have impaired glucose tolerance, that shape, the doctor's going to miss it, the volume of food. Impaired fasting glucose is what we're going to cover as soon as we do one hot minute here. So many of you know that I have an ongoing battle with Amazon. It's a love-hate relationship, and there has been another squabble that our raspberry lemonade is being sent back to us. So we have done a gift to those of you that watch all the way to this point of the show, that if you have not bought raspberry lemonade in a while, we have a really smoking hot deal on our website. Let's see if I can go to that. Yeah, here we go. I do want to say thanks for all the folks that supported the Mother's Day sale last week on the face oil. I had a few of my friends say thank you for sending it to them. I just need to push the right thing here. Oh, there we go. All right, this is my website when I'm on the, here's the homepage, and then this is the shop. And if you scroll down here, there is a sale here that says buy one, get one at half price. Again, these are expensive. I know I hear about this all the time. Can't you have it at any less cost? And I'm like, I think I'm the cheapest one on the market. Amazon is, I don't know, I'm going to do my best to restore this on there, but it's going to be a hot minute before we get that taken care of. So it'll be off Amazon for at least 3 weeks if I could guess that. In the meantime, we're going to give you the reward for, if you go to our website, this is probably the cheapest you'll see this ever be. But the way you get this discount is you have to put 2 of those in your cart to get the discount. It turns out if you push 3, it's not giving you the discount right now. So if you do put it in the cart, just make sure that it's giving you that second one at half price. And then again, I appreciate the support. That's what helps me make this channel for free. It is something that I teach patients when they're in the ditch, when they're having troubles getting back on board. Start with just getting ketones to circulate in your system. It does, ketones in circulation beget ketones, meaning those circulating ketones, even though you swallowed them, you did not make them, they allow that liver to produce the ketones. Ketones are made out of the mitochondria in your liver. And it's the perfect time for you to be saying, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Reset. Do not rush back into saying, I'm gonna have numbers like that, the ones we've just went through. The truth is, they didn't get numbers like that overnight. They were able to have a steady pace of how do I surround myself by support? How do I set up the expectations of what I should be paying attention to? And at the year mark, what you saw in that reversed impaired glucose, impaired fasting glucose is a remarkable result. As I look at patients with impaired fasting glucose, the key is doctors see it. To get it to reverse is something that not everybody takes the time to learn about, but they don't stick around. They just think they can't do it. And I just want to say hats off to this woman who said, yes, when I look at the change in what happened in my life, it was just really leaning in to study herself. And ketones in circulation are a great way to help with that. But I do attribute that improvement to a community saying, try again, don't run away, try again. And what you gift yourself is this longevity. Both of those patients having this reversal of their fasting glucoses, and then watching which one has a higher risk for disease. Let's get to that. That's the 2 magic words. So go to this circle page. All right, 2 magic words. Usually I can write on this, but I can't write on this. So 2 magic words. What reduces the risk of having insulin resistance come back? Number 1 is the insulin, or is the fasting blood sugar before you eat. And now I caused quite a fuss last week, and many people wrote in last week saying, what do you mean I can't eat until my blood sugar is 90? So if you go back to last week, you'll see that we talked about a case that's reversed insulin resistance. That's a good example of what healthy looks like after it all. And in part, it is recognizing what timing and what volume of food allows your body to are you healthy enough to eat at this point? And one of the metrics I used was fasting glucose. Now, I shouldn't have said fasting. I should have said after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if you have gotten to the place where, we teach this, the ketogenic diet in a way that is very, we're trying to step you through success. And so we've got you eating, 2 major boluses of food per day. You really cut out the carbs. You've got a good rhythm. And we're trying to get that evening meal earlier. Like, that is a really difficult step for people. Because the reason we want that evening meal to be earlier is they're waking up in the morning with the blood sugar above 100. I mean, it certainly isn't less than 90. Less than 90 says, boy, you really are reversing that insulin resistance. That's one of the magic words. That morning fasting glucose, when it is less than 90, you are doing great. But the number of people who say, there's no chance, you're crazy, that's not real. My blood sugar in the morning is 103 and I didn't eat for 2 days. I'm like, you're not gonna rush there. These 2 examples did not get there overnight. So you say, well, what are the, when you get to that step of, should I eat? You wanna say the place where your pain, and I mean that, when people deny food, it's a sacrifice. It's painful. It's not fun. You know, I work at finding joy in that, finding that there's ways to decrease the burden of not eating. But when the key from that 90 at 3 o'clock was, if you're trying to figure out if you are healthy enough to eat the meal at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I need you to look at your blood sugars. If you haven't eaten and it's 3 o'clock, I need you to fix what you're doing. Because if it's 3 o'clock and your blood sugar is still 95, 102, whatever, not below 90, and now you're saying, oh, you mean I have to wait till it drops below 90, and it might over the next 3 or 4 hours, but I'm telling you that is too late for your body to do that. You are going to make a bucket of insulin, and your morning fasting glucose, which is one of the key numbers for reversing insulin resistance, that morning fasting glucose is going to rise because you ate too late. So there's a rule that I implement when they're ready. And this is, again, please take this in the context. This is a YouTube channel that's teaching about the ketogenic diet. Talk to your own doctor. But that, when they're my patients, I will tell them 3 o'clock in the afternoon and a blood sugar that's above 90 means your morning meal needs to be the place you eat. And if at 3 o'clock you're continuing to see blood sugars above 90, that's the time to fast, from 3 o'clock until you wake up the next morning. And people have all kinds of excuses, but if you're trying to reverse this problem, again, reversing this problem is so darn difficult because it's sneaky, you can't see it. The first thing is morning fasting glucose. The second one is, let me go to here. I don't think I built these in. I was planning on writing, but I can't write them. So the second one is, what was your glucose at the 2-hour mark after eating? And did it get back to that baseline? You'll notice if you go back through these slides, there are several examples of what happens with what happens when blood sugar is doing it right. It starts at a certain level, it hits, and then it comes back down. Let me remind you from last week what the slides looked like for healthy people. This is the same where this is reversed insulin resistance. So again, look at that scale here, what the glucoses are, what the ketones are, and you'll see that the glucose in the morning is 70. It is 70. They have this meal, and it does shoot up into that 115 range, but it is below 140, which is like really important. But then over the 30, 60, 90 minute, that blood glucose by 2 hours comes back. And again, not quite at baseline, but that shape is what we're looking for. So the two metrics to say, are we reversed? Look at the fasting, or the glucose before they eat, and look at the glucose at the 2-hour mark. To help you better appreciate, is this right? Look at those ketones. So again, the ketones before eating, 0.6. At the 30-minute mark, not hardly changed. Again, when you get the difference between 0.6 and 0.7, that's probably within the error of that machine. But now at the 60-minute mark, it's a half, 0.5. But at the 120, you start to see that, okay, it's not plummeting, it is baselining. And we will see this over and over again with the longer patterns, that they don't end up with ketones on the floor for a week. That's not what happens. And I must say, I have been, teaching people this since 2015, and really have perfected, here are the steps to success. These two metrics are something I look at all the time. The ability to explain this to someone, I almost don't like to do it at the beginning because it can discourage them. Like, I'm never going to get better. I'm never going to get better. That's not true. That woman who had a fasting blood sugar of 110, she actually had an easier puzzle. I don't want to minimize anybody's effort, but her insulin resistance was far easier to reverse than the first example. The first example of the man, I am so thankful. He comes to Pin Chasers, and that they both have had microdosing of GLP-1 after that last 21-day course that took a ketogenic diet and elevated the hormone to keep ketones in circulation. When I look at people who are using just the hormone to try and reverse insulin resistance, they say, I'll just take that, take Ozempic, take tirzepatide. And you're saying, well, if you want to see if you're reversing it, check this out. Because without a ketogenic menu, the blood glucoses in the fasting state, and I shouldn't use the word fasting, right before the meal, are not below 90. The blood glucoses shoot way up because their body can't handle the carbs. And when that shoots way up, the ketones go to the floor and they stay there. And they eat those meals 2-3 times a day. It is smaller because of the drug, but the types of food that they're putting in their body does not reverse the insulin resistance. And that would be the tragedy, that they are spending the money on something so expensive that they are putting the effort in to try and reverse this. But without that baseline of ketones churning through their system, I would be really careful to give credit that they are reversing insulin resistance without fixing the fasting one and the 2-hour mark afterwards. All right, well, I can't wait to hear the feedback on that, if I lost my audience or if you understood that. I am looking at several of the questions that are out here. Let's see if we can get our questions up over here. Dr. Boz question. This is, again, my favorite part of this. Let's see, I can do this so it fits in our little screen there. All right, so Dolores K says, if your A1C is below 5, does that mean your insulin resistance is reversed? Dang, I wish that was true. That is not true. I have seen many people who their average blood sugar is low, and they're often on the GLP-1s is who I've seen this. Oh, actually, below 5. I'm sorry. I thought you said in the 5s. I don't know if I've ever seen one below 5. Okay, the ones that I've seen that have A1C below 5 but are still insulin resistant, their red blood cells don't last long enough. They've had a low hemoglobin A1C forever, and they shouldn't be using that. It is why I do like to cross-check. When I see a good hemoglobin A1C, but I see the other things. I see their C-reactive protein is elevated. I see they've got chronic ferritin that's elevated. They have triglycerides that are above 100. Their blood pressure is high and just doesn't want to come down. That tells me this A1C is not telling the truth. And that's where I would say, check the fasting sugar. Check what it is at 2 hours. There is no better way to do this than to wear a continuous glucose monitor. We had several of you sign up for those last week. Again, best little tool to say, don't ask me, ask your own body. And you say, well, only if I eat this way is it reversed? I'm like, well, that is the intervention of a lifestyle, is you must eat that way to reverse it. And then many people write in saying, well, can I go back now? And I'll say, I don't know. Check. What happens when you eat that many carbs? And if you go back to that first example, I will guarantee if he goes back to that chocolate cake, especially now, so close to that heart attack, so close to the probably 30 years of excess insulin, his body will betray him. It will shoot that blood sugar way up. It will take a ton of insulin to put that sugar back away. And that's the opposite of reversing insulin resistance. So, yeah, the half of Italian sub is good. Less is better. Less carbs is better. All right, back to questions. I am not going to try to say that one. Something Benedicta, J.L. Benedicta. Is there such a thing as too much autophagy or ketosis? What regular levels of ketones are too high? I would say no. I would not. I don't think I've ever heard of that. Regular keto, I mean, if there's one lesson that, this is our 12th week of our experiment, or we offered people from the last 21 day a 12-week experience that where we would write the prescription for the microdosing of GLP-1s. In fact, both of these examples are microdosing the GLP-1s after a really solid churn of a ketogenic diet. And I will tell you that their metrics of persistent ketones, meaning that ketone is often around 1, maybe 0.7, but 1, 1.5. I don't know if you saw the man's, 2 isn't strange for him to have. Without the help of that GLP-1, when he would mess up, it would push those ketones to the floor and he would not get there. I think he needs to be an advanced level of ketosis from now to the time he's in the grave, because there's that much disease around. His disease is a difficult one to see, And to reverse it is a persistent ketosis. So is there ever a time where you're in it for too long, too much? I mean, I just can't think of an example. You say, oh, would it be an extreme eating disorder or something? But they don't have ketones. Their fat circulation is really low. And most of them, they're in a starvation ketosis mode that is nothing like what we're talking about. So I just can't think of an example in 10 years that they were doing it too much. They were having autophagy too much. Very good question. I've never had that question before. All right, Penny writes in and says, what if my glucose rise after eating never increases more than 20 points, but starts from 95 to 100 instead of starting at 90? Right, this is a great question. So it says, you're eating the right foods. You are eating the right foods. The shape and volume of that food is really important. My glucose remains steady following meals and doesn't cause much. Yeah, the lack of rise in glucose. If we could have pushed reverse on time, Penny, and said, could we get an improvement in her blood sugars or in her metabolic health if we would have had her eat this way from the beginning? Yes. When people have that steady rhythm of what they eat doesn't cause a large rise, the next best step is routinely, and that doesn't mean every day, routinely fasting. So how did the habit of fasting end up in my life? Many hiccups to say the only way I keep my blood sugars in the double digits is that I was having a fast once a week. And the fast wasn't 6 days. It was 48. I mean, at first it was 36 hours was all I could do. And then I got better and 48 hours was what I could do. And then when I pushed it to 8 consecutive weeks of 72-hour fasting, everything got better. I mean, not only my ability to say no to food was leveled up. This is one of the steps in the keto continuum. If you haven't bought that book or you haven't used that workbook, it is a really great resource to say, what would you do? What would I do if you were in my clinic? I would follow this book. And there's like a badge of honor at the end, which is 8 consecutive weeks of 72-hour fasting. And I would not have you hop to 72 hours on the first one, but I would love it if you did this, that you wore a continuous glucose monitor. Because what's usually happening behind the scenes that they don't know about is that those blood sugars at night just can't, they go higher and higher. And if you are eating the right things, but there are some other things that you should be doing to lower the blood sugars. And sometimes all they need is that predictable fast. And again, I did it for like 6 years. I'm still doing it, but it's in the habit of my life. And in part, it's because of what patients showed me, how much reverses when you go 48 hours without nothing. And that continuous glucose monitor would finally be below 90 for me. So yeah, the next step for you, Penny, is fasting. You've got the food down. That's the next step. Talisha says, my keto mojo has shown 136 and ketones 2.1. Is that even possible? Or is the meter giving me bad readings? Yes, that's possible. That's funny. So what I think you're asking is, how the heck can I have ketones that high and glucose that low? Ketones that high while glucose is that low. Remember that ketone production can be, is a product of dropping the insulin. So when you have cut the carbs, when they first come in the ketogenic diet, they cut the carbs, which will cut the insulin, and this is how they're able to produce ketones. Now the insulin isn't zero; it is relatively improved over what it was last week. And so this is where insulin resistance comes to play. Is that what is insulin resistance? It's the ability to make insulin excessively, and your cells aren't listening. And so when you cut the carbs, you drop the insulin. It's a relative drop. You're like, oh, we're used to seeing 3 cups. Now we only see 2 cups of insulin. That relative decrease allows a whole crop of cells in your liver to make those ketones. And that really is it is possible. So here's what's going to happen next, though. You've got this wave of ketones, and we see this all the time. They'll come into group, they'll have ketones of 3, and the people whose ketones are on the floor just get hairy eyebrows saying "rawr." But it's not long after that their body resets. That they were able to cut the carbs to 20. They were eating late at night. They didn't have any problems because compared to what they were doing, this is better. And that's what lowered the insulin. But now their body has said, okay, here's the new rules. And if you want to get better from this point, we got to take it to the next step. That's why there are 12 steps in the keto continuum, because don't rush it. Get used to this. Find a way to enjoy the journey, but don't be surprised that in a week, or probably in about 3 months, if you're continuing this rise and you're really sticking to the rules, your ketones are going to be 0.4. And you're going to say, what the heck? Why is this? I'm being really good. And the answer is your body adapted. You need to go to the next step on that keto continuum. And that has been tried and true. Last question by Brian says, what's the best time to take creatine and will it raise my blood sugar? I have not seen folks with a raised blood sugar with creatine. I contend creatine should be taken routinely. So you'll have lots of bodybuilders say you need to take it pre-workout, right after the workout. I'm like, you just need to have it present. You're trying to get that creatine stored in the muscle cells or the brain cells, and that means you take it routinely. So find a rhythm of your, I actually had been using methylene blue. I'm still using it. And I'll do that in the morning, like before I start my day. And the creatine I've been putting at night. I'm just like, okay, I don't want to put both of them in at the same time for some reason. And so I've been putting it at night. Routinely is the key. You're trying to get the storage for that, that donate of a phosphate in your muscle cells and in your brain cells. All right, troops, that is a wrap. I would love, if you're watching this on replay, to say, give it a review. Let me know how you like it. Also, thanks again for all those supporting the team. I will see you next week.